Welcome to Delicious Paintbrush. Today we're going to talk about making a graveyard base for my Flesh Eater Quartz army. Hello, welcome. Alright, so it's time for graveyard bases, and this is what I do to all my bases, and that is to lay out a footprint on the base so I know exactly how much room I have on the base to decorate it and to add some more stuff to. And I usually do that with white paint. Alright, so next up, I cut some graveyard pillars out of these Reaper Bones graveyard set that I got from Reaper 3. And then I use these little bricks on the side to formulate them falling apart. And the reason why I do that is I actually want to add weight, or it looks like I have weight, to the actual stone structure itself. I mean, it gives it another dimension, so to speak. When you add things that are falling and moving, that is like, it looks like whatever's going to be on top of there is causing the bricks to fall and giving it a weight or another dimension. Alright, so next up, what I'm doing here is I have AK Interactive Desert Sand, and what I did is I'm putting little blitz, like streaking and filling up areas because I'm doing a graveyard base, so it's going to be pretty barren, very little life growing on this thing. This is a, death army, so I wanted very little life showing through. That being said, I'm going to add some Tufts in later, but with this earth, I'm just trying to pack up some, especially underneath this graveyard, this stone, this tombstone, because, tombstones are, we have like weight to it and they're shifting weight around, and there should be a lot of like mud and dirt that cakes around the object itself. So really important that you build that up to actually, make it look realistic, so it doesn't look like just a plastic piece. You want to integrate it to the base, and that's pretty much what I have done there. Alright, so next up I wanted to add even more stones falling. I'm trying to figure out where the best place for the stone to be. So what I did was I put glue on my table there, and the table is actually newspaper. So I put that there, and with the tweezers I kind of take the brick and put the bottom of it onto the glue, and then I'm gonna set it down somewhere within there and try to like just make it seem like the stone is on the edge of something, like literally give it a sense of falling, which is really, really important. And there it is. That sense of falling right from there, and you could see that it really does look like it's like falling apart there. I love the way that looks. Now I have this big old gap right here, and I need to fill it up. Now I don't want to use my AK Interactive Sand on this stuff because it's just filler. So what I'm going to do is take some wood filler, and I like to use the Elmer's glue wood filler, but you can use any one really. I just like the texture of this. And it's sandy, it's grainy, you can sand it down. It's meant to be sanded down if you need to, but the thing is that I have so much of it that, I can literally just pack it in there. And this stuff will dry on you after a while, and all you have to do is add some water to it and get the mixture flowing again. It's not really a big deal. One of these tubs should last you an extremely long time, especially if you're trying to just fill in some gaps or putting some areas in there. It's good stuff. It really definitely is. Now, if I left it straight like that, when it dries, it's going to look like, concrete, but one solid piece. Now, I don't want it to be one solid piece. These are stones and bricks. You see how it's broken off there? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start embedding some bricks inside that goop, I guess you can call it, that wood filler. So this way, it gives it an additional dimension to it. But first things first, right now it doesn't look like it's flat stone, so let's get it flat. And I'm using a sculpting tool to get it flat. You can get sculpting tools at your hobby store. They usually sell it down the hobby aisle. So just know that it's just a shaper. You can use as a metal clay shaper, I guess you can call it too, and they're very useful. I use them for applying all different kinds of base materials onto the base, even glue, because they're metal. I can just literally take alcohol and try to wipe off that glue, or you can always take debonder or something like that. You can always just remove it if you need to. But basically there is that base. I mean, it looks pretty cool. Now I usually outsource a lot of the materials for the base, and the pillar there, actually I changed it from coming from the Reaper Bones, because the original pillar that comes with the zombie dragon, I don't know, it kind of looks like a turd coming up, or a big old watermelon or something coming up from the ground. I just did not like it, and I needed to find something else for it. And luckily I was part of the Reaper Bones 3 Kickstarter, and I bought the graveyard set, so I could just, there you go. I painted it up. I didn't know what I would need for it, but I painted it up, or I tried to do some washes and play around. That's what I do with my Reaper miniatures. And when I need them to source them for basing material, I could just cut them up really easily. Okay, now what I'm doing is I wish I could have gotten this on the camera there, but I'm actually putting some stones in and just kind of like sticking them in there into the wood filler. Now the only thing that's holding it together would be the wood filler, so you kind of want to jam that sucker in there as much or as far as it could kind of go, just to give it a sense that there are bricks in there and it is kind of falling apart, so it's not just like one solid piece. So I'm going to add that to it. Again, adding to the decay motif, adding to things falling apart. Love that whole motif right there, and that's what I wanted to do. But it's cemetery. I wanted to make it like gates, so I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, where I'm going to have another gate on the other side to come later. Okay, so now I'm making green stuff. I'm doing the Neatitite, which I got from actually my big box store, hardware store, and it's because it's used for plumbing, like to really just put together like pipes or something like that, and just to plug it up, and so it's waterproof and everything else. But you can sculpt with it too. Now, one of the things about doing green stuff here is letting it dry for a little bit after you knead it together. This way it loses a little bit of that sticky texture, so you can really work with it. So just let it dry for a little while. Alright, so while we're letting that ball of Neatitite dry, or green stuff, what we're going to do is try to measure out where the other side of the gate is going to be. Now you could want it, I wanted to make it like a cemetery gates that's just like broken straight open, or a wall section that's just completely broken apart. So I want to make sure it's even, and if you want to make sure something is even, the best thing you can do is you can get either a ruler or some kind of straight edge, and you're going to want to put it together, and then take the miniature itself and just like set it down so you know what everything looks like before you do it. And I think that just looks really great. So yeah, definitely there it is, with the wood filler in it and the bricks coming out. Alright, now that the Neatitite is dry, what we're going to do is we're going to take a smooth rolling pin right there, smooth rolling pin, and we're going to roll that out just like that, and it's easy. It's not really sticking to the rolling pin now that we let it dry a little bit. And I think that's a trick. A lot of people try to use Neatitite or green stuff, and they try to use it straight out, and it's just way too sticky, and they have to wet it and everything else. Now, I didn't even wet this, but I'm still rolling it out. Looks pretty good. Now, they do sell silicone little rings for the flat piece of the rolling pin. Now, I do have them, but I guess I was a little bit lazy in putting them together. So, that's just me. It worked out fine. I don't have a problem with the way it turned out, but this is such a massive piece that even rolling it out, I don't think it was enough. So I went in there with my fingers and just like literally started pushing the Neatitite towards the center there. and just really getting it smooth. That is the idea, just to really get it smooth. Use your fingers to really get in there and push it out. I think that's the best way to do that when you're working with such a large piece. Now, once you get your fingers in there, then you could try to smooth it out. And you do want to kind of get this a little smooth, because the next step here, we're going to put some flagstones on there, and you want it as smooth as possible. Now, all my bases for the entire army, for my Flesh Eater Quartz army, is half like brick or mostly brick flagstones, and then I have the dirt itself. Now this flagstone base that I got from Green Stuff World, it's I did wet this one because I don't want to take any chances for any neotite get stuck in the inside of those flagstone base, because I'm pushing it down really hard here as I'm going through. You can see the entire table sort of shaking with how difficult I am, or how much pressure I'm actually adding to this. But once it goes through, I mean, look at that. And done. Instant texture. It is fabulous. All right, time for IK Interactive's terrains set, the light earth diorama. And I have so much of this. Really, I could have used the wood filler, but since I bought this, I was just gonna make use of it. So while making use of it, I'm just spreading it out, making sure that you don't go where the footprint is. You know, you really don't get into the footprint of where the model is, because you know that's where the model is going to sit. So you want that connection on the bottom of your model to be plastic to plastic. It is the most secure connection you can have without pinning it. And I didn't want to bother pinning that model, even though it is a quite large model, but I didn't want to pin it. So I just took this one little extra step where it was all I had to do was just avoid getting into that center. Now I'm stuffing some dirt into where that gravestone is, and I'm just going to go around and just literally it feels like I'm just decorating a cake. That's what it feels like, just spreading it out, making sure there's enough dirt throughout there. All right, so there we have slowly putting the paste on there. Just going around and floating it out. It's actually kind of fun. It's almost like painting with the lighter diorama effects. So I really do enjoy the process of actually doing this base. Now I was quite intimidated by such a large base. I didn't know what to do with it, but you know, it turned out to be a lot of fun. But it took me several days to conceptually understand what I'm going to need to do to this base, so this way, A, it doesn't look empty, B, it's telling some kind of a story. As you can see, I'm actually putting in a lot, and I mean a lot, of attention to all the detail that I have here. And the reason why is because, you know, this is the first large model that I've been intimidated with, and I've been having this model, this zombie dragon, I had for 3 years before I even put it together. So getting the courage and confidence to put it in here, I actually wanted to do something a little spectacular, you know. So alrighty, so time for these hands. Now these are bits that I've gotten from actually a whole bunch of different kind of crypt ghouls that I put together, and I had those there. So I just put them on the side and I put them onto a pill bottle, so this way I can paint them later. Alright, so I was looking after the texture had dry. I just didn't want dirt. I wanted gravel too. I wanted more texture to this base. And when you add different layers of texture to a base, it actually comes alive. It gives it more of a realistic feeling to it. So what I have here is actually road gravel, and that means I went over to the edge of my actual driveway, and I literally put in some road gravel, and I just put it in a container. Now there's different kinds of level of grit. There's super fine, and it goes all the way up to really coarse. And what this does is, again, adding variation, very simply adding variation without even worrying about, you know, without even worrying about, well, do I need different size aggregate or anything like that. It's all included. I just literally took it off and containered some road gravel, finely done road gravel. Walk to the side of the road, and carefully you can see that road gravel just gathers. You can go to your end of your driveway or what have you. If you really feel worried about, contaminants, you may, put it on a baking sheet and just cook it in an oven to kill any bacteria, but, and then wash it in alcohol. But, all in all, road gravel. That's all it is. Very simple basing material. Alright, so I added some skulls to this, again, adding more dimension, telling more of a story with it. The more you add, the cooler the scene kind of looks. So, you want to have some of that. Now, I found this extra piece over here of dangly bit that came with the zombie dragon, so I'm just going to dangle it from that post there that is actually bent. And I actually bent that post, like I literally just bent it. Alright, so now I have these stone, like broken sidewalk bits, and I got from White Metal Games. They gift that to me, and I put a cross there. These are all tombstones I got from a tombstone set online, and it came in a whole pack of them, so I just got it together. All right, time to get some paint on this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to prime it black straight through, making sure I get even coats throughout. You can see a sweeping motion. I'm using it like a sweeping motion the same way that I would, for a model car. Alright, now that it's all completely black, you can see a lot of layers. Now, with something this big, you can miss a lot of different layers of detail. So, while I'm here, I'm going to do all the hands. Yeah, I have a lot of hands over here to paint up. So, I just went straight through it. And I love the way that it just, is totally even, where I can highlight all the hands in one shot instead of having each individual hand painted, separately. Okay, so next up, I got some blue gray, but you can take any kind of mid-tone gray to do these things. It doesn't have to be a blue gray. I use heavy blue gray from Vallejo, but really, it can really be anything. Whatever is similar to a mid-tone gray that you have in your paint set will work for this application. Honestly, I didn't put a lot of thought into which gray I'm going to put. It was just kind of on my table, and I kind of, as a painter, use just what's on my table. I don't even turn around and get different kinds of paints. Now, sometimes I do. Sometimes I organize after a very large project or several projects or a marathon of projects. What I do is I will take all my paints and put them back on the rack, and then as I need something, go to the rack and get some color that I kind of need, and then it gets on my table, and then it stays there for the next year, and I try to use it up as much as possible. But yeah, so you don't have to worry about the actual exact paints that I use to get this. If you want to, I'll let you know, but it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that you have a gradient. You start off with the black, and then you have a mid-tone gray. And then afterwards, I'm going to hit it all much later with some highlights. Just having those three tones will give any surface the definition you need, especially with bricks or flagstones or anything like that. It's actually quite simple to achieve the effect. Well, I'm telling you, all you need to do is just get that mid-tone gray. And everything is kind of gray and dour when it comes to depth, so there's going to be plenty of gray. Later on, I'm going to put some brown for the dirt, and brown itself, it's so overpowering. So, a lot of the gray is going to kind of I want it to have a presence within the base. So I have to hit a lot, or half of it, 50% I would say, with the gray, or even more so, because once I put the brown in there, the brown color is going to overwhelm the scene, overwhelm the eyes. It's going to be hard to look away from the brown color to notice. And I really just want you to notice all the gray that I'm putting down here. All right, so next up is a flagstone. Now the flagstone, I'm trying to hit the flagstone, and I'm bracing my hand here on just on one side. So this way there's some light catches on one side, and that's going to be that right-hand side of your screen. You're going to see there. I'm just trying to hit it just on one side. Now usually what I do is I'll hit the center of the flagstone, but I'm trying something different now, just trying a gradient as if the light is coming from the right-hand side and just casting its light the brightest all the way to the right. And just by hitting the edges like that, just by lightly hitting the edges, you're gonna get quite like almost I would say a glowing marble kind of effect. I don't know how to say it. It's just really it's a fantasy effect that the flagstones don't actually look like that in real life, but maybe more like in the comic books or something like that. And I love that effect. I mean, really, and it doesn't take much at all. You do have to get a little good at knowing where or about where your spray pattern is going to come out, like I'm predicting where it's going to come out. And the only way you do that, like this in and of itself, is practice. If you get a grid on a piece of paper of flagstones or something like that, and you just practice to your heart's content trying to hit just one edge of the flagstone, that's excellent practice for you. You know, tape that paper down to a surface that is stable, and then tape that surface down as well. In other words, I usually use newspaper. So I take a piece of paper with the grid, put it on top of the newspaper, and then try to paint that paper so this way you can get it. But you know, I just practice on the fly here, and it's not so bad. And because I can always paint over, like at any point in time I can just paint it black, right? All right, so just hitting some areas again, trying to make it as ashen and gray as possible to match death. I want to make sure that all those little bits of aggregate are gray. All right, so next up I'm going to hit that Steinor's brown, but you can use any brown you want to. I'm telling you, any brown will work. Anything that's earthy, you want to do earthy, and that's going to give that texture to it. I like this brown because it's a little bit bright, but you get to see how quickly the color is going to overwhelm the entire base. And it's just a little bit of the surface area. I would say about 25% of the surface area is going to be brown, but just that little bit, since it's just color and their eye kind of just like really draws to color instead of gray, it's gonna really just like, you can see it already, it's starting to really seek in, like it really either give it definition. I just want to be careful and not overpower the scene with that. You know, I really want it to be mostly flagstone and gray right there. But you know, it's kind of cool. Now you don't have to be perfect with this. I like that because, you know, when you're getting to the edges, if you go a little bit over, that's okay, because, you know, dirt, you know, it gets on things. It's going to get on your flagstones, it's going to get on your base, it's going to get on places, right? So you may want to just spray a little bit. I'm even doing some of the aggregate on the flagstone itself. See, now you can see what I mean about it kind of like starting to overwhelm, even though it's like 25% of the base. Dirt gets everywhere, you know, so you have to simulate that too. And plus brown is a color, and you want to add some color to the base, to the gray, so it's not dull or anything like that. All right, so there it is, and it's looking great. All right, so next up, what we're going to do here is we're going to add some of that highlight. So now here's where you take a lighter gray. You have the mid-tone gray. Now we're going to go back with the lighter gray and really bring up, and you're just doing some spots, just a little bit, turning down the PSI kind of low, just to get some spots and not the entire thing. Just a little dab here or a little dab there really simulates it glowing or, you know, light catches. You know, there's something about the eye that catches the highlights just right, you know. It sees that it's dull and then light, but then it gets like that super highlight really makes it come to life, you know. And everything here, you know, you could paint it and it looks almost white here, but you know, as it dries, it's going to dry a duller color, so you don't have to worry about that, you know. So it will be a duller color, so there's that. And, you know, you want to be able to go through all the flagstones and all the things. You're going up to it again. And it's just a little bit, you know. You don't want to overwhelm it and make it all into one color. You want to show that you have the mid-tone and then the highlight. You don't want to drown it out, you know. And you can so easily drown this out. But look how I'm going through it, you know, just going through the light catches, coming in from the right. You know, coming in from the right, trying to get that light catch from the right. Now, right now, I'm getting some of this stuff into the crevices. Now, usually I freak out about that. Well, I guess I don't freak out, but I try not to do it. But in this case in point, I am actually going to hit it with an oil wash later, so I'm not that concerned. All the grooves and the cricks and the crevices, they're all going to be nice and shaded in with a nice oil wash, which I'll show you how I do later. So on this one with the highlights, I'm getting the biggest ones, and I am really trying to get that secondary highlight in there. Now I'm cleaning the Badger airbrush. I recently just switched airbrushes. I like the Badger as a starter airbrush. And I've used it for all my work on the channel for the last 3 years. So everything, if you liked anything that I did on the channel, I use this Badger Renegade for everything that I use here. However, I think it was time for me to explore different kinds of airbrushes, namely Harder & Steinbeck, and as well as an Iwata. So those are the two airbrushes that I really wanted to play around with, and so I have those two airbrushes. But now I have this one waiting in the wings, as well as I have a Sotar 2020. Now, Sotar 2020 I've never used, although I hear it's really amazing for details as well. But, you know, I'm in the market of selling them, so if you're interested, put a comment down below. What the hey, you know? I'll give you a good deal on it if you're interested. Alright, so you see how a little bit of highlights can go a long way. You can see it on the flagstone. Again, not overwhelming each piece, just putting a little dab here and a little dab there. I'm sort of trying to be careful, but I'm not being super careful, you know, so I'm not afraid. And that's what it kind of looks like right there. Okay, so time for Watercolors Brown 2. I personally like Watercolors Brown 2, but you can use any gel medium, light brown, and there comes the killer hands. And the reason why the killer hands are there is because I'm going to add some of those killer hands actually on the base. But anyway, getting back, I don't know what that was. It's like killer hands coming out of there. Getting back, this little glazing technique here is absolutely amazing. The transitions are crazy, and this goes for gel tape medium. So you have your scale color 75s, your fantasy and game sets and stuff like that, those browns, or watercolors. These are all gel-based mediums. They are amazing when it comes to glazing, and I wanted to glaze on some of that brown or different kind of texture of brown. I think the brown that comes that I use from Stynylrez is a little too stark there, so I'm just trying to add some variation. And you can see on the flagstone itself, the glaze is absolutely amazing, simulating that dusty effect throughout, and just really unifying the piece, really bringing that brown into color and into play. Love using it. I highly recommend it, I'll tell you that much. But, you know, be careful again about overwhelming the piece. You want to use it as an accent piece as well, although, you know, I really up the level of contrast and blend it in by using this glaze. Alright, so let's talk about that weird hands that just came up. So after building 2 of these boxes and having 40 crypt ghouls in total for my army, I had a lot of bits left over, some arms. So I figured, why not make a base where the zombies are actually coming up from the ground? Zombie hands. Alright, so here are the zombie hands, the I guess the co-star of the show. What I'm going to do is zenithal highlight, and you're going to see me just go straight around using that pill bottle and just going straight around. And just highlighting it from the top. Now they're all going to get the same type of treatment here, but it's so odd to see so many little hands coming up from one pill bottle. It was actually fun to do. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some flesh tone. So I'm using that dark green. It's the same thing I used for my pale flesh eater quartz skin, where I used the Stynol Res green primer, and then I put some Stynol Res some flesh color or yellow in there in order to simulate like almost like a light flesh tone. And I'm doing that zenithal highlighting here. It's all very easy to do. The bubbles you see inside the container of the airbrush is in the cup is because I back filled it or back pressured it, and that's where I pinch the front and let the air come inside just to mix up the contents within it. And I do that sometimes when I don't want to take a brush and mix it in manually. So yeah, just very simple right there. Gives you that two tones. You don't have to go crazy with the detail, and really brings out the dimensions of these hands. You know, you don't want to just color them one color and that's it. Alright, so time to paint them. Now I'm going to take brown, and you can take any kind of brown. I'm using leather brown here. And wherever there was a shadow, I'm actually going to paint that brown. So I'm just looking through the miniature wherever a shadow would be and painting that brown. This is called the layering technique. So I'm just blocking in that color. Now on the top for a highlight, I'm just doing that bone white on the bone pieces. So you have the brown underneath and the bone white on the top, and the transition green in between really does a great job of differentiating the color. So this is something new that I was just trying out, just literally just putting some layers. And I usually never paint with layers. I usually just blend everything. But, you know, it's all about experimenting and having fun with paint. So this is exactly what we're doing here. Just having some fun with the paint and just experimenting and doing some layering over here. Just simulating where the shadows would be. Besides, I'm painting hands.
Hands? Did somebody say hands?
Alright, so that was weird. Okay, brown number 2 again. I try to use the same colors as I would use throughout the base. And the reason why I use those same colors is because it actually makes it part of the base. Like, it just unifies everything. And this is just a quick glaze. And you see how the quick glaze is really bringing everything out. It's really darkening in the browns. It's really differentiating the undercoats of the white, stark white, and it's super easy. Notice I'm just keep moving. You don't want to stay in one spot so you don't get any drip lines. Alright, so next up, I'm painting the metal railing of the fence. Now I use Vallejo metal color. It is the only metallic that I use. It's just amazing. Now that's the only paint that I have to recommend highly. Vallejo metal color, and don't put it into your fine wet palette. You want to put it into a dry palette on this one, and maybe add some water if you want to, or flow improver. But you know, those metal flakes, they'll hurt you. Alright, game effects. This is dry rust. I really like this game effects or technical paint. Do not use your fine brush for technical paints. Just use your one happy brush or a disposable brush for it. And I'm just dabbing it on, and when it dries, it has this amazing rusty effect, you know. And that's what I want to do. I mean, these metal things aren't going to be shiny or anything like that. You know, you're not going to have it all completely shiny right out the gate. It's going to be rusted. It's going to be in the water. It's going to be broken. It's going to be scratched. So definitely got to put some rust in there, just going straight through all the metallic little pieces. So much fun to do. Very little effort. Getting an amazing effect afterwards. All right, so here we are. And there's what is that coming out of the gravestone? Could that possibly be
a hand? Of course. Where's my hand?
All right, anyway, that was so weird. Anyway, those hands. Let's see. Now it's time to have the most satisfying part of when you do a base. You gotta paint that rim, right? I love painting the rim. All my death bases have jet black, or non-glossy flat black, and I use Style Res black primer to do the rims of the base. Just, steadying my hand as I go straight around such a large base. Okay, so next up I'm putting some Tufts. You can get Tufts from anywhere. Really, I think I use WWS personally, but there are so many Tuft companies. In fact, there are other basing companies that are a lot better, I find, than the ones that I'm using. But, I bought them, so I'm going to use them. Never leave your Tufts alone. I mean, always, always, always tie them in, and I always put a shade, and I glue some shade on there. So this way, you paint everything you put on the miniature. You just don't just take a Tuft and throw it in there. You have to paint it somehow. And I find that shades really dull it down and really do a great job. And I use Agrax Earthshade on this one to get green, but I could have done it brown as well. So there it is, all done. And I'm going to take some of that green. I wanted to get mossy with the dirt. Again, adding a different color, a different layer. When you add so many different kinds of layers to your ground and your base, it keeps people looking. And that's what you need to do. Okay, time for an oil wash. Now, a lot of people are afraid of oil washes. Don't be. All I take is some mineral spirits, and I take the oil, and I'm using black right there, and I'm using a brush, not a fine brush. Do not use your fine brushes for this, or dedicate a brush for this, because the oil is not going to come off the paintbrush, and you're going to put it in your water, and oil and water doesn't mix. But you can see that once I put it on there, I'm really getting in there, and it loves to adhere into all those cricks and crevices. Now, if I want it to work even better, you could gloss coat the entire thing before I did this, but I didn't. I skipped this step because, well, I kind of started wanting the project to be done. It took me a month to get through this miniature, so, I was working at a pace, and after a while, when you work on a miniature for so long, you kind of just want to be done after a while. So I was starting to get to that point where I didn't want to take too many extra steps in order to finish it, but I knew it was going to come out all right. A worst case scenario, I could always paint over it and do it again, or take some mineral spirits and erase whatever mistakes that I possibly could make. So it's really very forgiving. I love oil washes for that quality, always being forgiven. Isn't that right, Hands?
Yes, I agree. Ha ha ha.
All right, anyway, I think I lost my mind with those hands. Hopefully that's the last time they pop up, right? Anywho, going on to that oil wash and going on to the flagstones itself, just to reinforce all those shadows and going through there. Now, the thing is, it leaves very glossy. You got to mat it down. All right, time to put on some glue and actually glue the zombie dragon to the base right there. Kind of the last part of the miniature, well, the last part of putting a base on is actually taking that footprint and putting your miniature onto that footprint and just really enjoying your work. Now, as far as graveyard bases, I think this is tops. It's definitely the best I've done so far when it comes to graveyards and creating a scene. I am very, very proud of this. It's all conversion. It's all done. It's all kind of fabricated from my mind onto the finished piece. So I really would going to coat it with a matte varnish and then be done. Well, thank you, and I'll catch you on the outro. So here is the graveyard base for this beast, which I'll be doing and working on the tutorial for the entire thing, and it's coming up soon. Well, if you like this video, like, share, comment, and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time on the Miniatures Paintbrush. Hey, it's Rob here from the Miniatures Paintbrush, and I just want to let you know that down below in the description, I put in an Amazon link, or several, to a couple of items in which I suggest and I recommend that I use personally in my videos, as well as, in my painting process. If you click on that link, the channel gets a percentage back without costing zero. Nothing, nada to you in the process. And all you have to do is click on that link and go shopping. Even if you don't buy the item that's listed there, Within 24 hours, if you buy something on Amazon, the channel gets a clickback without zero cost to you. It's really the easiest way you can support the channel. And if you don't want to do that, that's just fine. I'm pretty cool with you guys hanging out with me today. Well, thank you. I'll catch you next time.